Hi there. This is Coffee Talk number 3, setting criteria for employee goals and the evaluation of the employee goals. This is a very critical part, and I think we will have time well spent. So grab your virtual cup of coffee or tea and let's unpack how to set the criteria for the evaluation of employee goals. Okay, so by now you have gone through the strategic plan. You've selected the 2 goals that you want to work on. You've done this in conjunction with your line manager so that you make sure that you're working on what needs to be worked on and in the priority with which they deem is important and that they deem is appropriate. And then you have had this visioning session with your staff. You've talked about these goals. You've talked about what it means, the department, and what it means in relationship to the strategic plan as these goals are articulated. You've also, by this time, worked with each individual employee to create 2 goals that they can contribute to that has to do with meeting this criteria, meeting these 2 goals that have been set. Now, what you have to do is to develop and establish the criteria by which they will be judged. Why is that? Because at the end of the employee performance review period, you will invariably have a handful, or we will have a handful of employees who do not agree with the ratings that their line manager has given them. And so the question usually is, that manager graded me as meets expectations, but with everything that I've done, I clearly have exceeded expectations. And where do we go? We need to go to the criteria that you set for a meets expectation performance, and what you also stated would be a performance that succeeds expectations. And so if we have those sets of criteria in place, then it takes the guesswork out of it, and we're able to substantiate what you've said, or we're able to back up the manager and to create some kind of situation where we can resolve it before it gets to grievance level, because we don't want it to go to grievance level. And if we do have it to go to grievance level, then all the more that we need to have criteria set. So determine what a successful meets expectations job would look like. If you were peering through the window, what would you observe? What would you see? And the same thing for a superlative goal. You don't have to worry about the doesn't meet expectations, because if you've set the criteria and the standard for meeting expectations, then if anything that doesn't meet that basic criteria is below standard. Now the question comes, can all of my direct reports be evaluated as meets expectations? The quick answer is yes, they can, so long as you have set a criteria and everybody has operated within that criteria, and you have communicated this criteria ahead of time, and you're not just applying it on the back end like just a little bandage. This is what you get. That is why the Code of Conduct specifies that the performance appraisal process is not just something that happens once a year. It is a 3-part process that starts in May with you setting the goals. That's why we talked about setting goals such a great amount of time on the previous Coffee Talk. But setting the goals, but having a mid-year review, which is formative, and then having an end-of-the-year review, which is summative. So with those 3 mechanisms in place, those 3 procedures in place, you're going to engage in a performance appraisal process that will be defensible and that we can stand by. Okay, the other thing is that, if you say that I need to spread all of my employees out, I mean, some need to be below, some need to be above, and the most of them need to be in the middle, to suggest that bell-shaped curve. Well, realize that when we're dealing with a small population that we have in each of the departments, you probably don't have an adequate sample size to apply that. And you don't want to arbitrarily, some of the literature will state that you don't want to use that in a small sample size, because you would falsely force some employees into categories that they may not fit into, just so that you can feel comfortable that you've had this bell-shaped curve. So yes, all or most can be meets expectations. But again, it's the criteria and your application of it. Then the other flip side of the question is, can all of my direct reports be evaluated as exceeds expectations? And the answer to that is probably not. Because if that is the case, then perhaps you need to look at your criteria, and we need to see, is it realistic, and does it need to be adjusted? Because everybody in a large sample size could not be in the exceeds expectations category. Then that means something is amiss with your criteria. Now, the whole College of Bermuda College is a sample size, and if you looked at those areas of central tendency, you might reasonably say yes. Most of the employees would be meets expectations, and yes, you would have some that fall on either side, exceeds, and some which fall on the does not meet expectations. So don't be too concerned about that bell-shaped curve distribution that I've heard people talking about, but use the criteria. Now, the beautiful thing is the EPCR already has the language in the grid for meets expectations. It shows you what a good job looks like. So you've got a guideline there to go with. That's the beautiful thing about the way the EPCR is designed. And so use the EPCR language, tweak it for the goal that you have chosen, you and the employee have chosen, and then use the EPCR again to look at the exceeds expectation language, and try to come up with language on the front end that will help you to know whether that employee has met that goal. Okay? Hope that helps. If not, feel free to give me a call. We can work on this together if you should need my help. And if you do not, just go forth and do good, and look forward to talking to you later. Peace out. Bye-bye now.